Hey, fight fans, thanks for joining us. This is our little podcast we like to call After the Bell. This is when we talk about all the things that we didn't cover, we don't have time to cover, or just too intensive to cover in our short little in our short little other video podcasts. So we're giving you this audio, we're giving you the long one with this one. And so you can sit back, enjoy, grab a beer. We're going to grab one and we're going to talk some fights. Tonight it's going to be a little political. Dun, dun, dun. We're going to talk about some politics and fights. So we're going to start it off with the
biggest one.
Well, yeah, one that's definitely rocked the UFC.
And the MMA community.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of people in the MMA community do have opinions on it. And that is, if you're wondering with bated breath, the Reebok deal, the UFC uniform deal. Now, no other fight promotion has a mandatory deal like that. And I'm going to break it down really quick for you guys who don't know about the fight game to that level or how a fighter gets paid and affords his lifestyle as a fighter. And fighting is a lifestyle. For a champion, you've got to live the fight game. You've got to stay in top shape. You've got to have the right trainers. You've got to have the right people feeding you. You've got to have the right nutritionist.
Basically,
you've got to have
24/7, 365. Your life
That's
evolves
right.
around the fight.
That's right. You've got to have people, the right assistants. You've got to have access to the right training equipment. All of this is not free. All of this costs fuckloads of money. And so fighters need to get money where they can. Some of the biggest ways fighters get money is through sponsors. And they put their sponsors all over their banners. They wear their sponsors on their clothing. And up until the recent change of UFC rules, a UFC fighter could wear as many sponsors as he could get to sponsor him on his trunks, and each sponsor bringing in a dollar amount. Many of the smaller fighters that you don't know about, the people who don't fill the top of the card, who sometimes only fight bottom cards on television shows,
prelims, fight past prelims.
Things like that. These guys depend on the people to give them money, their sponsors, so that they can make their life happen, so that they can live, because some of these guys are only making, under 50 G's a fight easy.
And for a lot of you that don't know, the average fight camp, which goes anywhere from minimum of 6 weeks to as high as 10 weeks. Some guys have even gone above that, but from what the average is, it's about 6 to 10 weeks.
Right.
A camp can cost anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000.
That's right.
Okay,
That's
and
right.
that's broken up between, like my co-host said, between gym time, between sparring partners. More than anything, a lot of you got to remember that you have grappling camps, you've got your striking camps. Not everything is done all in one gym, so they really, really depend on that, especially because the sparring partners are a very key point. You try to bring in fighters that are going to match your opponent's style.
And those fighters get paid.
Exactly. Nobody gets punched on and grappled on for free.
Yeah, let me come to your gym.
And choke you out for free.
Or maybe you could just punch me in the face a couple times so you can get better, and I'm not going to charge you anything. That's ridiculous. So, all of these little things that the trainer needs to, or rather that the fighter needs to train effectively, are all compartmentalized, and they all cost a lot of money. And so fighters, especially starting out, really, really, really need their sponsors. And so the UFC restricting it and giving them these paltry $4,000, $5,000, $300, whatever the hell compensations. Mr. MMA, do you know the compensations?
For, if I remember correctly, for 1 to 5 fights, you get $2,500. For 5 to 10 fights, you get $5,000. And it goes up in increments. Basically, the number one contender would get $30,000, but mind you, he has to be advertised or promoted as the number one contender. Perfect example of where this does not apply.
Chad Mendes!
Or Anthony Rumble Johnson, who just fought Jimmy Manuwa. Because technically, Rumble Johnson is the number one ranked light heavyweight in the division, but he's not the number one contender. So he did not get $30,000 when he fought Manuwa this past UFC event.
Hype train.
He got 20.
The hype train ran away with this nigga's money.
The hype train got derailed. I told you. I'm sorry. Jimmy Manuwa, look, I give him utmost props. If this guy was in a dark alley, he'd beat the shit out of me. But when it comes to putting him against the competition that he's in the cage with, and if you look at his resume, the guy is fighting has-beens to nobodies. And and when you faces good to elite fighters, and even that term I gotta kind of use loosely because he's only fought really 2, or in Making Rumble we make 3, and the 2 being Gustafson. And my co-host really calls that a
fucking joke. I can't wait till he gets fucked up.
Okay, but when he folds like a lawn chair, I said, you know, and it was.
You guys like that.
I'm not. I
hey,
wasn't
but you know,
surprised
say what you will. He got the better end of the pay from Reebok, and if it were not a sponsored event, he would have been paid even more handsomely.
Exactly.
You know, if it weren't for the fact that he had to wear Reebok's gear,
But
both of those men would have made a hell of a lot more money. And guys like Josh Koscheck, who might not have the winning ways he used to, but has a name that'll sell a fucking ticket, he gets sponsors.
Now,
and he's going to be making fuckloads of money over there at Bellator.
What you guys need to remember, though, is what started this dilemma. Okay, remember, from the days that we went to, from fighters having all these sponsors on their shorts, what started the problem was the UFC mistakenly let 2 fighters in the cage with contradicting sponsors. In other words, I don't remember who exactly what it was, but let's just say it was Dynamic Fastener, and they had their competitor on some other dude's shorts. Well, the UFC was sued. And they lost in court and had to pay, from what I remember, $25,000 in penalties because of that mistake.
Which is really like you and I paying 25 cents for a stick of gum. Okay. That's really what that amounts to when it comes to what the UFC's pockets are like.
But the UFC and the powers that be didn't like that. So next thing you know, came the sponsor tax. And that was the first brick to the building of this horrific Berlin Wall.
Berlin Wall.
That I would like to, okay? And they automatically, mind you, the highest penalty is $25,000 unless it's like something, I guess, really blatant. But from what I gathered, it's $25,000. So they made the sponsor tax 50 G's. So guess what? If you make the mistake, they'll be covered in court, still pay their legal fees, and still keep about $20,000 to $25,000.
Thou shalt not, says the UFC.
Okay.
And now I didn't know about that part of the politics. Yeah. I had heard that. I read a statement from Dana White highlighting some of the things that having a uniform does in terms of legitimizing the UFC and MMA in a way as a sport, because some people, as my buddy here was telling me earlier before the podcast, some people do refer to UFC just when they're talking about mixed martial arts, because the UFC is so
them it's like one and the
it's
same.
so socially synonymous in a way. And so, I mean, what Dana White said was, he said that uniforms will bring a familiarity, a visual familiarity to an audience. To an audience. And I can't argue that. I think there's a good thing. That's a very good fucking point. But I did note that he allows Monster Drink logos on Conor McGregor's shorts, and I'm wondering why that is, if there's this fucking rule, and why does it not apply to some fighters. But the thing is, he was saying that okay, it'll legitimize them like the like NFL, NBA, and all of that. They all wear uniforms, and it'll create a uniform look. All the fighters are now clothed for free. Okay, now that is definitely being taken for granted rather, because the amount of sneakers that a fucking fighter goes through is phenomenal in a year.
No, not even sneakers. Now, if you notice the last weigh-in, everybody had Reebok underwear.
Right. So they're all being clothed, and when I say that, I'm talking about literally thousands of dollars of clothing. You know what I mean? Probably near $5,000 to $8,000 in gear they're given,
and they're getting peanuts out of it.
But they're getting the free gear, and they're getting the relation to a uniformed ideal visually for an audience, and ultimately, look, I'm playing devil's advocate here because I think that the Reebok deal fucks the fighter royally, and
big time. No grease.
These guys are prize fighters, kids. They might be under this promotion, but at the bottom line, as we all see, they'll skip and dance and go where they please when they really want to.
Even if a fighter is on the fight pass, okay, he deserves or she deserves the utmost freaking credit because of the sport you're engaging in alone.
I think any man who opposes another man in physical combat for the entertainment of others deserves respect.
But what kills me about this
Legitimate
Reebok deal,
entertainment,
okay.
mind you, legitimate entertainment.
Well, number one, we're already making a mistake because more than anything, these things are supposed to be referred to as kits and not uniforms. Okay, that's number one. That's how the Reebok and the UFC have been trying the most to promote this out there and always refer to it. Okay, but number one, to their reasoning behind this, or number two, beyond having the ridiculous logos, because that was another problem. Sometimes there were certain things on guys' shorts in the wrong places.
Oh, okay.
Like when you see the words "tap out" on a guy's ass. It just.
But tap out is again, whoever had tap out in a Reebok uniform was getting an exception. Tap out is a sponsor.
No. But I'm talking about before. Now this.
Right. Well,
okay.
They put it on the ass because the ass is big money. Big money is the right thigh, left thigh, and buttocks.
Yeah, but
that's big money for shorts.
There's certain ones where you kind of knew at the time of purchase this might not be the
but if they're giving you the money, if they're sponsoring you, you're gonna put it where you're gonna put it to make your money.
You really don't want to see the words dynamic fastener on a dude's ass.
Yeah, but if they're giving you the money to feed your
family, or
family,
even on his crotch, because what are you trying to say?
You might not want to see it, but I'm sure he's happy he has it.
It's not even about the. I didn't even. You know what? Until this came up for discussion, I didn't care. To me, I didn't even really see it. I just cared that the guy had shorts on.
Right, 'cause,
I never really cared. I just knew that. Oh, look! The only time I cared is when I wanted
tighty whities or boxers. That's what I noticed.
That's it. That's all I really. Because in the end, you know what I noticed? The sponsors, when I was like, oh, this particular sponsor is sponsoring this guy. Look, he's got the name on this.
Yeah.
That would happen very rarely. Maybe every other event. I really didn't care.
Rarely,
I just cared about the guy being in the cage and performing.
Right.
Okay. So now now let's go back to what the number two reason why they implemented this nonsense. The word aesthetics, to change the aesthetics, to somehow give the sport a more legitimacy. Okay, and I'm gonna tell you in my God honest opinion, it did neither. Okay, it did none of the above. Okay, let's even look at the definition of the word aesthetic. Okay, this is every dictionary is a little different, but this is about the pretty much the average. The philosophical theory or set of principles governing the idea of beauty at a given time and place.
It's a real thing, kids.
Okay, let's change this. I'm going to say it one more time because I stuttered. The philosophical theory or set of principles governing the idea of beauty at a given time and place.
Right.
Okay, now let's look at these Reebok kits. Have they, since their implementation in July, changed anything of the sport?
I think what's funny about the word aesthetic also is that there's so much that can be personal in terms of the interpretation of the word. Just using the word beauty in its definition, we all know beauty is in the eye of the beholder and is arguable. A woman can stand in front of me that I lust after, and you, the audience members, would laugh at me because you think she's a hog. So beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and therefore the term aesthetic to try to be legitimized either way, pro or con, very difficult to do, but it's a perfect word to use.
Okay. And now here goes to part B to that. They implement the uniforms, and the major consensus from the media and from the fans is who's who. The uniforms, everybody almost looks alike. Okay, and supposedly there's, the fighters had an implementation with Reebok to customize it more to their liking, their taste, so that it's them. But they all look the same. So how do I know?
That same argument can be made for any NFLer on a line with his fucking with his back to the camera, and all you see are numbers. But you see their name. To be fair,
and that
to be fair, you see their name in UFC.
But what do you
Reebok.
see on the UFC Reeboks?
They've got
Except
their names.
for the colors.
They've got their names.
Where?
On the sides, on the side of the pants. They do.
Not Mir. Not Arlovsky.
I've seen a lot of them with their names on the side of their pants.
Are you talking about weigh-in day or fight day?
Fight day, and during the fight.
Then I must need new contacts because, like
Possibly.
I said, there is ultimately
I
at one point in time, the very first night.
Specifically when I can't remember the fight. Maybe you can help me out, Mr. MMA. It was a recent fight where one of the female fighters almost had an accident with her
Calderwood.
uniform. Right. In her fight, they had names on the pants.
Joanne Calderwood.
Yeah.
Okay.
In her fight, they had names on the pants.
Right.
So there are some fights that I could think of distinctly, but I'm sure that I don't know. I'm sure there are some fighters and most
honestly,
fighters.
to me, it made no difference. Those things could have been there. They could not be there, and
They also have red and blue stripes on it.
The aesthetic of the UFC has already been carved in stone.
I don't know. I disagree with
marble.
that. I could not disagree with that more because the UFC has changed like a maturing creature. And in changing, it's changed its aesthetic so much. Look aesthetically.
But not in view.
Not in view. Only because people don't follow it as closely as you and I do.
I mean, if you really look at from when they went from Spike, from when they went to Fox, the presentation is still the same. The distribution numbers are different.
There was a big difference in the presentation recently on the Conor McGregor pay-per-view. So is that a symbol of something to come? Who knows? But it was definitely a change in the aesthetic for the presentation of the show.
That's because it's the first time they ever had a fighter who the whole country, no matter where you were having an event, they were coming out of the woodworks to tune in.
Not true. Ronda Rousey come out
everywhere.
Ronda Rousey will get you to come out and put your ass in a seat to watch her choke someone out in 3 seconds. She'll do that. She has that draw.
But Anderson,
and you never see
Anderson
that crazy
didn't have
shit.
that draw like that.
No one really has their
GSP.
Draw. There's a rare. I think that John Jones, if he would learn a little more about being a fighter in terms of approaching it in a more adult way, could have that kind of draw. But no one really has ever in mixed martial arts had the draws that UFC enjoy right now. And that's another reason why the uniforms kind of choke the fighters. They've got the opportunity now to make more money on pay-per-view than they've ever had. Therefore, getting more views from individuals and the sponsor taking recognition and the sponsor giving them more money, being more valuable to any sponsor who wants to sponsor them. That's where the fight game is at the UFC. These fighters are more valuable than and I think that might be the bottom line. The fighters are more valuable than the cuts that they're being given, or the share of the breakdown of funds that
on the Dotson card was that UFC 191, right?
Yeah. Pitiful.
They said
great fight card,
Reebok,
pitiful outcome.
The average sponsor payout
on pay-per-view
for the Reebok's payout. I'm sorry, the average Reebok payout was $8,750. Okay, and I'm gonna tell you, if you look at the numbers,
people, you should be making that in a couple of weeks, and if you're not, step up your game. But really, you're not busting your nose open for people to watch you bleed. Now, $8,000 for that?
Now, listen to me very carefully, folks, because that's the average. That was the average. That's taking all the numbers put together.
That's like telling a fighter, yeah, we love what you do. Thank you for drawing attention to our promotion with your skill set, but we're going to shit all over you with $8,000.
No,
that doesn't even pay for his clothes. Luckily, with the Reebok deal, like I said, they get clothes.
But if you've been following me on Twitter or follow me on the Facebook page.
Follow Mr. MMA during the fights, guys. It's so much fun. I think he pissed off Luke Rockhold the other day. It was so funny.
Actually, was it Luke? No, it was T. Wood. But
Tyrone Woodley. We love you, Ty.
But
don't hate because we got opinions too.
If you really look at the Reebok payers, because it was on our page and I tweeted it as well.
It makes you want to punch a baby in the face.
A majority of the fighters actually went home with $2,500 to $5,000.
$2,500.
Okay, the only
that
reason
doesn't cover transportation. Okay, $2,500 for a fighter in his clique.
Okay,
it's not even covering transportation.
It was $2,500 or $5,000. The only reason why the average was $8,750 because you had guys like Ross Pearson, Anthony Rumble Johnson, Demetrius Johnson, and
past that 10 fight limit,
and John Dodson.
Think about how many fighters retire without ever having 10 fights.
I'm sorry, Arlovsky and Mir. Okay, because they all got the highest. Demetrius Johnson automatically gets 40 because he's the champ.
He deserves
the champ gets 40.
40 G's. He could have made that with one sponsor.
Okay.
He could have made that literally with one sponsor. If he were allowed sponsors on his pants, he would have walked out a millionaire that night. Well, I'm sure he's already a millionaire, but you know what I'm saying. He would have walked out with $1 million worth of sponsorship alone.
I believe both Arlovsky and Mir came out with 20,000. So did Rumble. And Ross Pearson, because of his place in the tier scale, got 15,000. They were the only ones who had double digits in the thousands.
And for Ross Pearson to be fighting for as fucking long as he has been fighting, and for someone to tell me $15,000 for this skill set and this determination, everything that Ross Pearson brings to the fucking promotion, $15,000.
That's a smack in the face.
I really feel it was. It's almost like
that's a smack.
I feel they need to be ashamed of themselves.
Because
they're prize fighters. Now listen, in all fairness, we have no clue the compensation that this private company gives its fighters. We only know what they release as the fighters' pay. And releasing a low fighter's pay number is good for everybody. The fighter gets a lower tax bracket. The UFC gets lower taxes. It's a good for everybody. So who knows what goes on behind closed doors with this private company?
But
we just don't know.
But there wouldn't be a class action lawsuit going on. There wouldn't be fighters talking about it, or even at least showing reluctancy when the question is put to them.
Mr. MMA, can I, if you want to, let's pause on this fucking Reebok. Oh no, it's the same thing. The class action lawsuit. Let's look who's involved in that, shall we?
Jon Fitch, Nate Quarry, and Conley.
A list of losers and never wases, if there ever was.
And I believe Brandon Vera is also
I mean,
in there.
the biggest thing about Jon Fitch was the hype that was around the possibility of Jon Fitch that he never quite lived up to.
Well,
and
dude,
Conley needs to stick to the movies and stay off the
He held the
steroids.
number 2 spot for at least 5 years.
I'm not trying to say
that
Jon Fitch can't fight. I'm not trying to say he can't fight.
The type of person who's thinking about it, their fight style might not be exciting, but if they get the job done, they get the job done.
That's right.
Fitch was the man.
He
was a wet T-shirt. Let's be honest.
Fitch was an incredible grappler. But he was a fucking boring ass fighter. And I'm all about technique. That's why I was not bored for a second during any of Mighty Mouse's show with ever really, because he can be on you.
That on conditioning. I mean,
I think it's a stylistic choice. I think it's Fitch's stylistic choice.
I think what the feel that I get from people and that I notice even sometimes from myself is that no matter what, you want a fighter to come in 100%.
Yeah.
But you want him to fight at 110 and 120.
If they can, always.
And you have to understand, these are their careers.
Their life. It's their life.
I think that's why that's that dual-edged sword when they knock Greg Jackson fighters, because they sometimes appear to be the best point fighters in the business.
Yeah,
but they want to win too.
Greg Jackson is running a business of his own that is booming. Booming. The Jackson gym, the Winklejohn gym is booming.
And the thing is that what you wanted to see from you wanted to see what Mike Chiesa does.
Right.
You wanted to see Mike Chiesa in the Jon Fitch. You understand my meaning?
Right. You wanted to see matchups.
You can see he's tiring.
And I think that the matchups carried part of Fitch's career. It wasn't necessarily him per se as him versus someone interesting. And they weren't always great fighters. Let's be honest about it.
But let's also be honest too. They weren't any slouches, and they were the dudes who had knockout power in their hands, and they couldn't get up off the floor once Fitch got him down.
That being said, right? So, because we
totally fucking
back to the came lawsuit. Off track.
Yeah. It's the antitrust, where they basically feel that fighters are being blacklisted.
I don't
by
really
the UFC.
respect. I respect Jon Fitch, but let's be honest. He should have called it quits a long time ago. He was a guy who wasn't a real fighter, but fought well and didn't know when to quit. And so, really, man, I got not the greatest amount of love for him. Whatever, it is what it is with him. And Kung Lee, I love watching Kung Lee. Kung Lee is awesome in movies and on TV. All right, he needs to stay the fuck out of MMA because he's too juiced up and he looks stupid now physically. He just looks like a fucking toy.
So you think no matter what, he was dirty on that last incident?
Fuck yeah. Look at Kung Lee in Man with the Iron Fist, and then look at him when he was fighting recently.
In Man in the Iron Fist, he had a lot of freaking armor on, dude.
No, Kung Lee fought, he was the lion style, bare chested. Yeah, trust me, I'm a big fan of that movie. Okay. So he fought bare chested with a wig on, he was the lion, and he was not looking like G.I. Joe with a kung fu fucking
So all the
grip.
points that his legal team brought up about the incorrect way about the handling, let alone the results, at the time of which they took the...
A million people can come to me with solid facts that are proven by law.
So like Kung Lee, five doctors no?
Like Kung Lee was not on drugs. You're never going to tell me, as a guy who was a fan of Kung Lee before he got to the UFC, that he was not on drugs when he got to the UFC. He definitely was. And I got no proof to back that up, and that's just my opinion. And so he could be clean, and everybody can prove he's clean, but you'll never get me to say I think he was.
Okay, so then, your point being on that one, as far as the lawsuit,
all of them got a fucking bone to pick.
And in other words, disgruntled employees?
Yeah, not that they're not right. I'm not saying they're not right, but I'm saying
they
all got a legitimate. I did. I just hated the fuck out of all of them.
I was about to say,
yeah, dude, I just word hated him. I hate it.
I'm not. I kind of feel
right?
I'm one of those type of people. There's no 100%. That I believe in the yin and the yang.
Yeah.
As much as you can find positive, sit down and try to find the negative, or vice versa.
Yeah, that's fair.
And you'll find it. So the thing is that I do believe that they have a legitimate argument.
Yeah.
I mean, and you have to understand that the Fertittas and Dana White have a legitimate argument too. They've been around the boxing business so long that they've seen fighters go home with $420. It was I believe it was either Bloody Elbow or MMA Junkie out there that shared it. A fighter went home with 400 and change after training for 6 months for that fight.
That doesn't pay for
And
your
he
medical.
won.
That doesn't pay for your post-fight medical checkup,
Yeah,
kids.
and he won.
Okay.
And the guy won.
You're gonna have medical bills.
So the thing is that if you compare to what the average is what they're if there's fighters getting paid that and the card was, from what I heard, was a pretty big card.
Listen, it's a tough.
I mean, it's the what am I called, the relativeness. So the thing is, if you look at what some of the boxers are going home with versus what the average UFC fighters guaranteed to go home with, it's a huge step up compared to the boxing arena.
Let's look at that, because boxing has been around and progressed into what we refer to as the sweet science for over 100 years. I mean, boxing was part of the Olympic Games, the original Olympic Games.
But so is wrestling.
Yes, but wrestling has had its mutation, and wrestling has turned into something in our modern understanding of it that is not quite competitive, though it is highly aerobic, technical, and impressive.
It's true. When can you say it was the last time I watched an exciting wrestling event?
Well, I'm not. We're gonna talk
Unless
about.
it was the
Listen,
WWE.
kids. Sidetrack. We're gonna have a little truth about that very soon for you. A really interesting concept of WWE and the UFC and the progression of wrestling in history. But right now, we were talking about the deal that Reebok gave and how
ultimately did the uniform kits really change the aesthetic and give the UFC more legitimacy. And in my observation from every event since its implementation in July, none.
Yeah.
It made no difference.
I'm gonna disagree. I hate the fucking idea of ripping off the fighters. I hate the whole way it's been done. But I've gotta say, I like the uniforms. I think they look good. They make it look like an organization that's got their shit together. And I hate the way the payment layers and tiers has been decided.
Yeah,
that's just wrong. But I do like the uniforms, and I think that the fighting people the fighters that the UFC have are so completely talented that they're going to bring the exact right look.
But was it needed?
It wasn't needed. But I'm never going to argue that it was needed. I'm
mean,
never going to argue that I like it.
Next thing you know, they're going to start giving out
I'm
kits
never going to argue that I like
drivers.
all aspects of it. Well, listen, NASCAR drivers have a certain aesthetic. Yes, but I see what you're saying, because those guys are fucking ridiculous with sponsors. I got it.
And they live the same way
that's
the fighters
banana
do.
sandwiches. You could never do that because you'd lose a sport. But the UFC is growing, and they're nipping that possibility at the bud here. I'm playing devil's advocate, guys. I'm not for it. I mean, I'm not for cutting off the fundings to the fighters.
And charging a sponsor $50,000 just because you want to make sure you don't have enough money to pay a legal team to cover your ass for that? I mean, if the max penalty is $25,000, I mean, obviously, I have to guess maybe in other states it could be worse.
Listen,
but it's just what was the point in that?
Yeah, no, and I just have to hope that all these fighters have management around them, at least the ones who can afford it at this point, that really have made good deals for them and made good contracts for them, and that they're getting monies that are undisclosed to the fight fans like us. Because if that's not the case, then there is a sorry state of affairs financially for a fuckload of fighters.
And on top of the class action lawsuit, now you got the Teamsters and Culinary Union, I believe 296.
Flexing their muscle.
Joining together, trying to unionize.
Union.
And the UFC just had to put out a memo to the fighters if they signed a union card.
If the UFC fighters unionize, the UFC will break the union, will hire only non-union fighters. It will be setting the sport back almost a decade. I mean, it will change the sport so dramatically. And you'll see promotions like the circus act that Bellator is become even more closely related to WWF. I mean, it will just set the sport back if they unionize. And I know that might sound shitty.
And take away extremely from its legitimacy.
I know that might sound shitty for someone to say, because I really overall support the idea of unions. But I one time saw all of the bookstore clerks in a mom and pop's bookstore walk out because they didn't like it and started picketing and unionizing, trying to unionize. They wanted to make a union, and the mom and pop said, no, you can't. And then they started picketing it. And they picketed this little store for like a month. It was right by my job, and I walked by it every day. And one of them stopped me one time and tried to get me to sign a petition or sign something to say, hey, help the union. And I'm all for union. But you know what I saw? I saw a bunch of people who had a job who felt so entitled that they would jeopardize the people that gave them their job in order to prove some kind of uniformity point. Meanwhile, Barnes & Nobles doesn't allow you to unionize, and you're not picketing there. It's too small to unionize. You will destroy the entity that it is if you unionize it. You can't unionize a mom and pop's bookstore, and mixed martial arts isn't big enough to support or to have a union. What do you say about that, Mr. MMA?
No, actually, I don't disagree in any way, shape, or form. I don't really see it gaining momentum in any way, shape, or form. I don't even know if the UFC loses the antitrust, lawsuit, if that'll even push something like that a little bit more for it.
There's just too many promotions out there now. When that was started, there were fewer promotions than there are.
But their argument is that they're being blacklisted, and they're not being blacklisted. Fitch found a job immediately after.
Fitch got championship fights.
Quarry got a fight.
This is kind of my point, that these guys got a
Quarry got a job.
Fitch had He had an opportunity to get a fucking belt and be the face of a promotion and fail.
Okay, and
let's failed.
Let's not kid ourselves.
It is what it is.
Conley would definitely be fighting in Bellator.
Dude, Conley needs to clean the fuck up. Really, he's a mess. I don't know. Dude, you need to stick to acting. You need to stop this fighting game. What are you, 46? Look at yourself in the mirror, dude. To a guy like me who's followed you for the last 15 years, you're not looking too good.
Wow, he's angry with you.
I'm just saying, what the fuck? Don't fuck up the game and then be like, oh, I got screwed over. Don't play the game sideways and say, oh, they didn't play fair with me. That's bullshit right there.
But then what? But on the other side of the coin, what if all his training and everything was legitimate, and if you really look into how number one, how they screwed up his sample, they didn't even have a B sample to test.
If you tell me that a man in his mid-40s can bulk up like that to the point where literally when Conley was in the UFC, veins were popping out of his arms and neck.
The picture he posted on Instagram was
vicious.
Yeah.
He looks vicious, and he never looked that way as an actor.
But he was posting videos every single day of his training.
Hey, I don't listen.
Everybody blinks. Leading up to that Bisbee
Everybody
fight.
Blinks. Everybody. Close your eyes and see what you see. That's what you see.
So you smell PEDs in the water.
And check out our Truth About episode, guys. Check it out. Anyway, and they've been really harsh about that kind of thing in the UFC and in mixed martial arts, and all these, what do you call them, controlling bodies, all of these...
well, let's talk about the next victim in the war, Stitch Duran.
Oh, right. Rewind. Sorry, kids.
Okay.
Yeah, if you think about that Reebok deal and how to cut your nose off to spite your face, the UFC got rid of one of, if not the best. I think I'm going to say the best. He's arguably the best.
At least a legend. No matter what. When you see this man's face, you be like, I know him. You might not even know his name, but you have seen him before. And it's always been doing a boxing event or always been doing a mixed martial arts event.
He's been the guy. He's been the go-to guy, and everybody knows it. He gave the UFC legitimacy in the octagon before anybody knew what an octagon was. And so... Stitch Duran is the cut man for the UFC, and he was the lead cut man, the number one cut man with the UFC, almost from its inception, since Dana White really started calling the shots, definitely. And
2001.
Yeah, and so what they did was he had an opinion about the Reebok deal. He said something to the effect of it's not good for cutmen because, again, he's a guy who gets sponsors on his clothes, and now he won't be able to have them. And
because the deal didn't originally include the cutmen.
Yeah, this is a sentiment that has been said by other people. Stitch Duran is not originating this thought for the community that he's in. A lot of fighters said the same thing, and a lot of fighters like Stitch Duran were exactly fucking correct. But the UFC felt like they were going to make a point about complaining about the Reebok deal. They were going to really be authoritarian, and they cut Stitch. They fucking fired the number one guy in the sport at what he does just to make a point about this deal. And the point is, don't talk bad about it.
And what bothers me even more is that technically I feel that between Ryan Jimmo, and he was released, okay, but I think that was also, he was released basic on his performance.
Yeah, really.
Maybe his comments on the Reebok deal made it easier, but ultimately it was more on performance. But Ryan Jimmo, Brendan Schaub has definitely said worse than what Stitch Duran's comments were.
He's torn it apart.
Okay, Rogan himself. Rogan, our famous number one color commentator for the UFC,
the mouth of MMA, if you will.
And Matt Mitrione, I feel, didn't say something really outrageous, but his comments were definitely a lot stronger than Stitch Duran's. Yeah. And guess who still has a job? That's what I'm saying.
I think it comes down to putting asses in seats. Stitch Duran is awesome and fantastic and is loved as he is by all the fans. Doesn't really put asses in seats. All of these fighters, and especially Brendan Schaub, who I'm not a huge fan of, never been a great fan of. I love him. I mean, fan of as a fighter. I love him as a person. I love what he does. I follow Fighter and the Kid. I like Brendan Schaub. Don't get me wrong.
Agreed.
But what I'm saying is I never was a great fan of him as a fighter. I became a fan of him kind of recently, actually. Or more recently. And so he put asses in seats, though, despite what I think. If Brendan Schaub was on the card, people would come in just to see Brendan Schaub fight. Okay, that's asses in seats. That's money for the promotion.
Because when he fights for that to the level that you like.
Well, that's why they can say. That's why they can have opinions. They're allowed to have opinions with Zuffa because they put asses in seats. They're money earners.
Here's my point to play on the other side. You got to remember, though, look how fragile. Right now, the average is what? 2 fights in a row, right? Unless you are constantly leaving it in the cage, because what you have guys. I have to look this up. I know there's more than one. The one that comes to mind the quickest is Dan Hardy. 5 losses in a row. Okay, we know fighters 4 losses in a row, but they still kept their job because every time they were in the cage, they were leaving it in the cage.
Right. Well, this is kind of my point too. The fact that the fighters can kind of have an opinion about the Reebok deal and Stitch Duran could not is that they put asses in seats for the business. They are a bigger part of the financial aspect of the business than Stitch Duran, or at least perceived to be.
Yes, but cutmen almost practically decide the outcome of a fight by the way they treat those wounds. Could you imagine?
The cut man's got to be the most underrated man in the fight game. Got to be the most underrated man in the fucking fight game.
Stitch said it best. He said, "Do you know how many fights, how many cuts that if I didn't treat them and know half of my experience, the fight would have been over, and we wouldn't even remember the outcomes that we do now."
Yeah. If you remember back when Clay the Carpenter Guida would tear it up and leave it all, and his heart was bigger. His heart was bigger than the fight. Really. What? Those two guys, Stitch Duran worked miracles. If I ever see you
in public, I owe you a beer.
Yeah, dude, I owe both you guys.
Just for that, right there, please.
Really.
Yeah,
Stitch Duran worked miracles with those guys' faces in order for them to get some of the victories that they won, and that's just a sure solid fact, like Mr. MMA was saying. But hey, we can't really cry for Stitch Duran. He's making money now. He's making better money, I believe.
He still works for the Klitschko's.
That's right.
He just worked the Berto Mayweather fight, 49-0.
Paid.
But you know what? That should move us on to somewhere next, but because we could pretty much go all night with this Reebok. I'm gonna
just
tell
another
you
thing
right
on Stitch, though, real quick, bro. Stitch Duran also works for. He just got signed with World Series of Fighting as their official cut man now, so he's officially the World Series, and they don't have restrictions on him like the UFC did. So he's also the head cut man at the upcoming Bellator Dynamite event, the kickboxing MMA dual event Dynamite Circus.
Hey, and the powers that be at the UFC, when he was on the Bellator card, you suspended him for a while because I thought he almost got fired. I hadn't seen him for a while. And it was due to the fact that he supposedly gave Bellator legitimacy. What is he going to do now for World Series of Fighting?
World Series of Fighting, as I've been saying this behind the scenes to my buddy here, Mr. MMA, World Series of Fighting is creeping up to be a real serious competitor.
Yo, Ray
in this game.
Cepho, I love what you're doing, man.
Yeah, great job over there, guys.
Keep
You
it
guys
up.
are making great decisions. You guys are honing great fighters. You guys are finding good talent. You guys are making fight fans like me really excited.
If you keep going this way, I think you can be. I'm sorry to say, even though nobody wants to be second best, but since UFC would be considered number one, you guys can really be the next minor league and in future competitor to
I'm
the
telling
UFC.
you what, with this whole Reebok deal thing, everything is up in the air because if they choose to let fighters, if they choose to make the pastures truly, truly greener monetarily, then fighters will go to those greener pastures.
Those wrestlers
None
that
of
they
these
picked up.
guys are tied by blood to the UFC. None of them. All of them eventually can walk, and most of them have clauses in their contract that say if they were given a big offer by some other promotion, the UFC has an opportunity to match.
Yep.
And so, really, World Series of Fighting has an opportunity to keep, maintain, and strengthen the landscape of MMA.
But that brings up a good point. What about what happened with Josh Thompson? He decided to see what free agency would hold, and he finally got back in the UFC. And ultimately, the UFC decided, no, go ahead, see what you got, and now he's in Bellator.
Right, right. Well, let's be honest. Josh Thompson took, I'm going to put it lightly, a fucking beating. All right? And he didn't look good. And say what you want about the way the UFC works with fighters that they cut. They have a sick, inane way to see you on the downslope, the fast downslope. And they cut right before you really fall all the way down. And so for some fighters, I mean, it's happened with Fitch, Yushin Okami, and now I predict with Josh Thompson that they don't have a lot of fight left.
All right, now, I don't even.
Yeah, well, we're gonna move on. Fuck the Reebok deal. No, dude, we've been battling on this motherfucker.
We just
forever.
think, yeah.
So we're gonna talk about NSAC. Let's talk about some political shit. We're talking about political shit in tonight's episode of After the Bell, and NSAC has been all in the news with the cult of Diaz.
If you're wondering what he means, it's the NSAC or the NAC. Is kind of weird because a lot of people feel putting the S in there is kind of stupid. But we're talking about the Nevada Athletic Commission. And more than anything, they just recently handed like my co-host said, a 5-year suspension to Nick Diaz for his third offense on marijuana. Okay, and the outrage that's been expressed out there for this ridiculousness, it's beyond. The petition right now he has going on online. In fact, you know what? I'm gonna check for you, fight fans, right now.
It's a load of shit, man. I went down, I read this thing, and there was supposed to be this guy, Dan, and I went down to NSAC, and I wanted to talk to Dan about this whole situation, and I knocked on the door, and all I heard was, Dan's not here, man. Dan's not here. Dude, what is wrong with these people that they think that marijuana is some kind of performance enhancer? I would like to smoke them all out, and so they can see.
No, and then
Not
and if I remember correctly, on his second offense, he was asked by one of the female commissioners, I don't know if it was Lunville, what does he use it for? And Diaz basically said something along the lines where it helps him focus during his grappling. And, so you basically use it to enhance your performance, like the knee bone's connected to the hip bone type thing.
Yeah.
And, like, really? That's where you're going to go in public with...
Right. It's kind of like you squint sometimes when the wind blows in your eyes, and therefore, squinting in some way enhances... I don't know. That was a bad metaphor, but I can't think of to rudimize it or simplify it enough that there's no way that you can take some of the crazy shit we talk about and the truth about performance-enhancing drugs and compare it in what it does to the body and everything to marijuana and say that in any way they're alike. It's kind of stupid.
Unfortunately, I don't have the information in front of me, but there's at least 3 different things Don't get me wrong. I love my marijuana. But there's at least 3 different things.
Dan's not here, man. Dan's not here.
On the athletic level, on the physical aspect of what you were trying to do, if you were doing anything athletic, there's 3 things that would automatically hinder. Okay, those same things that the reason why people.
And we're only saying this because it's common sense, kids. This is common sense.
Okay, and it's not in any way, shape, or form performance. It takes away from your cardio. It takes away from actually your sense of depth.
You're inhaling smoke when you do that, and it's a bitch to try to get your cardio up when you're inhaling fucking smoke.
Mind you, the man who competes in triathlons before
I'm not trying to say he doesn't got good cardio. The guy's got incredible cardio, but I don't think that the smoking's helping his cardio. You know what I mean? You know what I mean. So,
but basically what we're trying to say is that there was nothing in any way, shape, or form, in my opinion, that was really being judicial or being what's the word I'm looking for? It wasn't business as usual.
It wasn't even insightful.
It was personal.
It wasn't properly judicial. It wasn't insightful. It's not informed. It's not even informed. I mean, there's so many problems with Nevada State Athletic Commission saying that marijuana is a performance enhancing drug that it's ridiculous. And the idea that fighters like Paul Daly, who blatantly strike a fighter after the fight in open violation of any sanctioning regulations, gets a slap on the wrist. And
now Jake Shields is doing 50 hours of community service.
Jake Shields had an excuse, though. This guy, Paul Harris, is an animal.
Was going to break his arm.
Yeah, he's an animal. But so I didn't want to talk about Jake Shields. He had a great excuse to knock the fuck out of Paul Harris. But, I mean, let's talk about Daly, because that was open, blatant violation. And nothing really happened to him. And now a fighter who is one of the most enigmatic fighters, says what he wants, a free thinker, a free talker, a free man by his own stance, and would probably Stockton backslap anyone who would deny that fact. You're going to take away this man's livelihood for 5 years because he is an open medical marijuana user.
Okay.
That's ridiculous. Anybody who knows Nick Diaz, the cult of Diaz, stand with me and hold hands. We saw him fuck up Cyborg Santos. We saw that. We saw him take those belts. We saw him teach those lessons. And we feel that anything like this is stymieing his ability to be effective at what he does best. You are denying this man his opportunity to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness because he takes a medical supplement that is non-enhancing that you guys have some kind of hypocritical view about.
But in devil's advocate, he never reports it. He might tell it to the media, we know, but no matter what, by rules, when you apply for licensing, that's where I can understand where the commission has that is tired of that disrespect.
Yeah.
Because he's done it now 3 times.
Listen, I can
But you guys put out a protocol of what you're going to implement for the new punishments towards all of the breaking of the rules, whether it be PEDs, whether it be stimulants, masking agents, okay? And you even exceeded that. Like, what are you trying to? While we got this power, before it's a little time left, let's go for the gustos while we got it. You know what I mean? Like I agree with you. Like I said, you're killing the man's career. He's 32 years old. Who can come back in at 37? That's a type of ring rust I would never want to put to the test. And there's a petition going out right now. If you folks didn't know, I've been sharing it on Twitter. It's up in there. It's to lift the NSAC ban
internet nerds
from MMA fighter Nick Diaz. It's wh.gov at /INUSF. Right now, he's up to 28,690 signatures on this petition. Okay, and they need another 71,310. But that goes to show you how many people are outraged about this. It is ridiculous because his opponent, who at the hearing, I couldn't make sense of what his legal department was saying, let alone Silva himself.
Listen.
And he got off with a year. The man said it himself, I've never used PEDs in my life, let alone gotten bagged for it. And I get 5 years, but Anderson Silva gets 1.
Yeah, I think the problem.
Silva runs from 1 test. Didn't even take it, just runs.
And when he says run, he means literally breaking stride, feet to ground fast runs. That's not a fucking metaphor. He ran.
Thankfully, it was appealed, but he got a lifetime ban.
Lawyers, baby, get them, get good ones. But I think part
it
of the
just shows the NSAC's career of abuse and power.
Possibly. I think part of Nick Diaz in particular, part of his problem is who he is, why I love him, why there is a cult of Diaz. Nick Diaz will tell you exactly what the fuck he thinks, and he thinks abstractly. He does not think the same way most people think, in my opinion. He thinks at angles at things to get to points that we are still trying to see through.
But let me ask you this one question, because I understand. I love where you're going with it. But the thing is that ultimately, is it the NSAC's jurisdiction to govern that?
Right.
If you really think about what are his ultimate offenses.
Yeah, you're right. What I'm saying is that when he goes to defend himself, or when he says something in defense of himself, I mean, he is a natural-born fighter, and his tendencies towards self-defense in terms of protecting that soft side of Nick, which I really do believe does exist, is a turnoff to most people. He'll say something to you, and you don't like it. That's just the way it is. If it's hurt your feelings, unless he really knows you, he probably doesn't give a fuck. And he'll say it again.
You don't cry blood.
Yeah, he'll say it again. And Nick Diaz is one of those guys that does everything he can to back up what he says. And that's my kind of man, a man who can walk the walk and talk the talk. But like I say, when Nick Diaz looks at a situation, it's at weird fucking angles, and you just got to listen to him talk. And he makes perfect sense, but very obscurely. And I believe that he turns people off when he talks, and I believe that part of the reason he got such bad hash is because he comes off as a bit of an asshole, you know?
And to me, when the asshole I could have lived with, it was when he was going for the ludicrous paydays.
Oh, fuck it. He deserves it.
No. There's a different. No. The man is great, and he talks trash. He does shit in the cage that most other guys won't do. But that's the only reason why. And and ultimately they all knew what his cardio and what his grappling expertise was. Those fighters weren't willing to test their cardio against this man. That's what it all boiled down to.
I'll argue every time that he should have got those fights he called for when he was in his prime, because they would have been perfect fucking fights. And the only reason it didn't happen is because he knew what he was worth.
It's a dual-edged sword. I think that it's almost like if you're gonna go and make up any fight, then here, let me make up a fight and you pay me this.
Well,
and you ask for a ludicrous amount.
Fighter does.
But if you
He's
ask
a
for
prize fighter, you don't got to give him a ludicrous, but god damn it, he should ask for it.
It was still too early in the MMA game to becoming like that. To me,
he was already a young legend.
Especially
already a young legend at what he had done.
Especially in the welterweight division.
It was a tough division.
He might have been the legend, but he was definitely the shadow to one man.
I think the UFC made him the shadow, and that's what his argument's been.
You cannot blame the UFC for the numbers and the distribution. Ultimately, if what Diaz did in front of the camera and how GSP, and mind you, GSP is a very soft-spoken person. Okay, if you really think about it, he's technically a very soft-spoken person. The hardest thing this man ever said was how he was unimpressed with Matt Hughes' performance when he came in the cage and stood in front of him.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wonder what he thinks about the whole NSAC stuff. George always pushed for like some cleanliness, some higher testing standards, and all of that. I mean, he really pushed hard, and kind of I think that's why he left the game, because he felt it wasn't happening fast enough for him. And now it's happening. I wonder what George... Do you know... Have you read anything about what George St. Pierre might think?
I think the man is enjoying the life stuff. The last I heard is that he's
of a millionaire.
He's contemplating it, but I've heard that he's got movie deals and things, and he's been showing a lot of Instagram photos. Like, he's been passing by camps, and he's been showing himself back in the training and everything. But I don't know if he's going to really want to come back to this. The man beat his whole division 2 times over. He's a legend. He's definitely going to be in the Hall of Fame. And I don't see anybody matching that in that division, because now the Sharks have been coming out. The Sharks in every division have been coming out.
It's a tough one.
But what we need to realize is what we're trying to bring up is where it is in Athletic Commission's power
their purview,
start and stop,
so to speak.
Okay,
right.
And it was already
how long do their tentacles reach?
It was blatantly apparent by Pat Lundvall that she wanted the immediate lifetime ban.
Do you think so?
Okay, she did. It said it. She said everybody heard it in the
for Nick Diaz.
Yeah, that was the first thing she suggested.
That's fucking banana sandwiches.
That was the first thing she suggested.
Oh my God, woman, you should lose your job.
That was the first thing she suggested.
You should lose your job because you do not understand fighting
Okay,
fighters.
and Diaz said it best. I've never done a PED,
lifetime
never
ban
been
for
busted
Nick
for
Diaz.
it.
Have you lost your fucking mind?
Okay, and I've never done a PED. I've never, let alone been busted for it. And I get 5 years, but my opponent
The
got a
man
year.
uses medical marijuana. Get over it.
Anderson Silva.
I bet your daughter had an abortion. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. I'm gonna get sued. I'm talking about, of course, Mr. MMA.
Anderson Silva, folks, got caught with 2 anabolic steroids. And let's be honest, after breaking
And the
his
nigga was
leg,
like, I didn't do it.
Okay, after
over and over again.
After
Be like, man, we caught you. Your hand was in the cookie jar. Your left foot was out the door. And in your right hand, you had a cookie half eaten. I mean, we caught you, nigga. We caught you.
The man breaks his leg. Okay, and makes a comeback within a little over a year. Hell yeah, he was using steroids. You know what? And I don't blame him. I would be doing it too to salvage my career.
Technically, medically, he had to use steroids during that to rebuild the muscles and get everything working right for him. There was a medical steroids that had to be used. But the reality is, he should have took more time off.
But he gets a year. Okay?
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate him for that. I think it's a damn shame. I think you look like a fool denying it. But I don't hate him for that. And he's still the Spider, even though history shows that certain fighters have fought stiffer competition, buddy.
The thing with me with Nick Diaz is that he rides a thin line between
love and hate, really.
Tough dude and prima donna.
I don't think there has to be a thin line. I think Nick Diaz
Diaz
encapsulates both of them. Nick Diaz is the tough dude prima donna. I think that's what he is. I think he takes pride in that, and I love him for it. And fuck it. Prove him wrong. That's where he stands, and I'm standing with him on that. Prove him wrong.
And he did stay in the cage with a juiced up Anderson Silva.
What? Come on, man. And I'm not saying Nick Diaz is the greatest fighter ever. But Nick Diaz is a great fucking fighter, a legend, and the idea that he can't take some medical marijuana to calm the stirs of his mind is ridiculous.
Okay, and that's another thing, folks. You got to remember, when these things come up, okay, it's metabolites. By definition alone, it means this was something that was already in the fatty tissue, from what I gather, of his system. It means it's already passed through.
Right.
So you can't even prove that the man was high at the time of the fight. The only thing you could prove was that he smoked.
And you know what? If you did prove to me that Nick Diaz was high at any point in time when he's fucking people up and choking people out.
Imagine if he was sober.
That would it would blow my fucking mind, and I don't think I can handle it, because the things that the man accomplishes are not done without clear mind, clear thought, clear action,
And this is where all of this leads to what we were talking about in the ultimate picture is UFC and MMA finding its legitimacy.
Right.
Okay?
How does that work?
Is that if you're going to make circus fights and do things on a whim 1 minute and then try to follow some form of mainstream schedule and logic, format.
Right.
The next minute, you can't blame somebody like Nick Diaz who will
take advantage, capitalize on it.
Okay, and no matter what, give you what you want to see. I mean,
and fucking perform. Okay. Yeah, he just wants his cake and eat it too. So what?
And I think he should get that right in between the middle.
That's fair.
Okay.
I'm just saying I can't hate him for. I don't discount any of that. I acknowledge that the man asks for a lot. He wants his cake to eat it too, but he draws a lot. He's a big name. He's a great fighter.
Like,
he
know who I would love to see?
He comes in to fight.
Imagine Donald Cerrone and Diaz.
Now, or Donald Cerrone now, or with Nick Diaz now.
Like, in other words, he fought the younger, and we know why he lost that fight. He got overzealous. He let the trash talking get
Donald Cerrone now is a whole different animal. What happened to him was he peaked kind of twice. He's in his second coming. It's a great thing for anybody who's doing anything for their livelihood to be able to peak twice. And Donald Cerrone is rare form. He's rare form for a fighter now, in my opinion. He's very active. He's very successful. His skills are honed. His mind is there. His discipline is there. I mean, everything is clicking on all cylinders for Donald Cerrone. Donald Cerrone is soon going to be the champion in his weight division. So to fight Nate Diaz now, no, it would not. Nick, excuse me, I'm sorry. Right. But no, it wouldn't go the same way.
Oh,
Donald
no, I
Cerrone
wouldn't say
would
right
beat
now.
him.
I would just say I
Donald
would have just
Cerrone
loved to,
would beat him.
You know, because the thing is that
that was one of the fights that should have happened early when they moved over.
To me, Nick, hey, look, man, I understand automatically you're a prize fighter, so you feel you should automatically facing the champion. But when you've been out for a year to 2 years, even if it's on a self-imposed retirement, you have to have a tune-up fight when you come back in the game. Whether you don't think you have ring rust or not, that's what I'm talking. That's where Nick
disagree. I disagree. If a man like Nick Diaz can say, I can step in the ring and beat whoever.
But he's not a god.
No one is. But I have confidence in him to come to the game.
And the closest we come to that is George St. Pierre in the welterweight division.
Look what the bullshit that Conor McGregor talks. And look what he does. I have confidence in Nick Diaz.
Showmanship, truth about. On our site, check it out.
Yeah, definitely. But I have confidence in Nick Diaz that he's going to talk the talk and he's going to walk the walk.
And
if he wants his fair cut of the money,
if
he wants his fair cut of the money, his personality is so fucking weird that it's hard for him to get to Conor McGregor status.
But this is the thing: if you want the sport to become mainstream and you want it to have its legitimacy, he cannot skip the line anytime he damn well feels like it, just because he will always perform.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. You know, this is dwindled into our defense of Nick Diaz, his legend, and his trial outcomes with the Nevada State Athletic Commission.
And I hope that appeal works.
The true injustice that we feel has happened, kids. You guys need to look into it and whatever, you know, if you feel good about it, sign a petition or whatever. And we're going to wrap this up with a little bit of talk about the Reebok deal and NSAC and what they're doing. And, hey, why don't you weigh in? Why don't you comment on what you've heard and what we're saying? And tell us what you think.
Please, because I definitely want to get the little pulse on that, because I know I can't be the only one out here.
I don't think you are, my friend. And don't forget to follow Mr. MMA when he live chats with everybody during the fights. He live chats at every fight night on Twitter at The Weigh In MMA. He talks to fighters, he talks to fans, he talks to coaches. He'll talk to you. Why don't you follow him? Live chat with Mr. MMA. We'll catch up with you later after the bell. Peace.